It was one of those warm summer Saturdays when the sun seemed to shine brighter than usual, and the whole neighborhood came alive. The local community pool was the heart of the town during summer, a place where kids learned to swim, parents relaxed with cold drinks, and families gathered to cool off from the heat. The smell of sunscreen mixed with the faint scent of chlorine in the air, and the sound of children laughing and splashing carried across the park. Among the many families there that day were twin brothers, Jordan and Jaden. At just 14 years old, the twins were full of energy, curiosity, and that eagerness for freedom that often comes with summer vacation. They looked alike in many ways, same bright eyes, same wide smile, but anyone who knew them well could tell them apart. Jordan was slightly taller and carried himself with a little more seriousness, while Jaden had a playful, easygoing charm that made him quick to laugh and quick to make friends. The boys had begged their mom all week to let them go to the pool with their friends. She was a busy woman, often tied up with work and community meetings, but she trusted her sons. She gave them her usual reminder: stick together, respect the rules, and look out for each other. The twins had nodded enthusiastically, knowing she didn't need to worry. They weren't troublemakers. In fact, most parents in the community knew them as polite, respectful kids who loved sports, reading, and joking around with their classmates. When they arrived at the pool, they were greeted by a lively scene. Kids were diving from the side. Some were practicing underwater tricks, while others floated lazily on colorful inflatable rings. Parents sat under umbrellas, sipping iced tea or chatting about weekend plans. The lifeguards blew their whistles from time to time, reminding kids not to run along the wet deck. Everything felt normal, safe, and welcoming, the way a community pool should. Jordan and Jaden wasted no time. They tossed their towels onto a bench, adjusted their goggles, and jumped straight into the water with a splash. Their friends cheered, and soon they were all racing across the pool. The twins loved swimming, not just because it was fun, but because it gave them a sense of freedom. In the water, no one cared who was taller, faster, or stronger. Everyone just laughed and splashed together. After a few laps, they paused at the edge to catch their breath. Their friends joined them, and soon the group was trading jokes, daring each other to swim underwater for as long as possible, and challenging one another to jump from the highest diving board. It was the kind of carefree joy that only came with long summer afternoons. While the boys played, the crowd around the pool shifted in its usual rhythm. Some families packed up and left, while new ones arrived with fresh towels and picnic baskets. The atmosphere was friendly, almost festive. No one paid much attention to who was where, because at the community pool everyone was just there to enjoy the water. But then, quietly at first, and then with more intensity, the mood began to shift. It wasn't anything obvious. It was more like a subtle ripple, the kind you don't notice until it reaches the shore. The twins were too busy laughing and swimming to sense it, but a few parents sitting nearby noticed a woman enter the pool area. She was dressed neatly, her sunglasses perched on top of her head, and she carried herself with an air of authority that wasn't needed in a place meant for relaxation. Her eyes scanned the pool, pausing on the twins and their group of friends. For reasons no one could quite understand, her expression hardened, her lips pressed into a thin line. Jordan had just climbed out of the water, dripping and out of breath after winning a race against his brother. He shook his head like a dog, sending droplets everywhere, and laughed when his friends groaned about getting splashed. Jaden was still in the pool, floating lazily on his back, staring up at the sky. They looked like any other kids enjoying their summer day, but to this woman they didn't. She marched closer, her sandals slapping against the wet concrete, her eyes locked on the boys. She stood there for a moment, watching them as if waiting for some excuse to step in. The other parents sitting nearby shifted uncomfortably, sensing tension but unsure what was about to happen. The twins, still in their own world, hadn't noticed her yet. Jordan reached down to help Jaden climb out of the pool. They sat side by side, legs dangling in the water, talking about what snack they should buy from the vending machine later. Chips, candy, maybe an ice pop to fight the heat. They were debating loudly, laughing at their silly arguments. When the woman finally stepped forward, her shadow fell across them. The boys looked up, startled, expecting maybe a lifeguard telling them to move away from the diving area. But instead, they saw a woman they didn't recognize staring down at them with a look that made their smiles fade. "Excuse me," she said sharply, her tone leaving no room for friendliness. What are you doing here? The twins glanced at each other, confused. We're just swimming, Jordan replied carefully, unsure of what she meant. This pool is for members, the woman snapped. You need to get out. For a second, neither boy knew how to respond. They each had a membership card safely tucked into their bags on the bench, just like everyone else. They had signed in at the desk, just like everyone else. But the way she was looking at them, it didn't seem like she was really asking about membership. Jaden opened his mouth, about to explain, but something about the woman's cold eyes made him close it again. His brother, always the braver one, tried to stay calm. We are members, Jordan said. We come here all the time. The woman frowned, clearly not satisfied. I don't care. You shouldn't be here. Get out of the pool area right now. The boys froze. Around them, the sounds of laughter and splashing had quieted. People nearby were starting to notice what was happening. Some looked away, not wanting to get involved, while others whispered to each other. The lifeguard on duty blew his whistle, glancing toward the scene, but he didn't step in yet. For the twins, the joy of the afternoon had suddenly drained away. Their faces, which just moments ago had been lit with laughter, now showed confusion and unease. They felt like everyone's eyes were on them, waiting to see what they would do. And that was how the perfect summer day began to turn into something they never expected. The poolside was still buzzing with kids laughing and splashing, but for Jordan and Jaden, the world suddenly felt quiet. The woman stood over them, her arms crossed tightly against her chest, her eyes narrowing with each second they didn't move. It wasn't just her words that stung, it was the way she said them, sharp and certain, like she owned the place and had every right to decide who belonged and who didn't. The twins had been raised to respect adults. They weren't the kind of kids who talked back or argued. Still, something about this moment felt deeply unfair. Jordan tried to stay calm. We do have passes, he said carefully. They're in our bag. The woman shook her head as though she didn't believe him. I don't need to see them, she said, her voice louder now so others could hear. This is a private pool. You two need to leave. By now, a small circle of people had started paying attention. Parents sitting nearby lowered their sunglasses, curious about the argument. Some looked uncomfortable but stayed quiet. A few children stopped splashing and peered out of the water. The lifeguard, still standing on his chair, seemed frozen, glancing back and forth as though he didn't know whether he should step in. Jaden shifted nervously on the edge of the pool, his wet feet dripping onto the concrete. He hated being the center of attention like this. We signed in at the front, he said softly, almost like he was trying to remind her instead of argue. But the woman didn't back down. Don't talk back, she snapped. I know who belongs here, and it's not you. The words hit hard, though they weren't shouted. They carried weight, the kind of weight that made the boys feel small. It wasn't about a rule or a membership. It was about something deeper, something the boys had felt before but never quite like this. Jordan clenched his fists at his side, not out of anger but out of helplessness. He wanted to explain again, to prove himself, but he could see it in her eyes. No explanation would matter. She had already decided. For a long moment, no one moved. The sound of water splashing seemed distant, as if the whole pool had gone quiet. Then, almost reluctantly, the twins began to stand. Their heads hung low, not because they had done anything wrong, but because they didn't want to make things worse. They stepped away from the pool, water dripping from their arms and legs, their fun day dissolving into embarrassment. Their friends followed them with worried looks. One boy whispered, "She's not allowed to do that." But his voice was barely audible, drowned out by the soft chatter spreading among the adults. A girl frowned, glancing between the twins and the woman, clearly uncomfortable. But no one spoke up loud enough to stop what was happening. The woman, satisfied, placed her hands on her hips and nodded to herself, as if she had just completed some important duty. She didn't leave. Instead, she stood tall, watching the twins closely as if to make sure they didn't dare return to the water. Jordan and Jaden walked slowly toward the bench where their towels and bags were. Their shoulders were slouched, not because they were ashamed of who they were, but because it was hard to carry the weight of being singled out so publicly. Jaden sat down heavily, grabbing his towel and pressing it to his face, not to dry off but to hide the sting of unwanted tears. Jordan sat next to him, his jaw tight, his mind racing. He wanted to protect his brother, but he didn't know how. Their friends hovered nearby, unsure of what to do. One of them muttered something about going to get a lifeguard, but none of them moved. They were just kids, caught in a moment too big for them. The pool, once filled with carefree noise, now carried a tension that wouldn't go away. The woman still stood near the water's edge, arms crossed, her gaze following the boys like a shadow. The lifeguard finally climbed down from his chair and walked toward them, but instead of addressing the woman, he spoke softly to the boys. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "You guys okay?" Jordan looked up, searching the lifeguard's face for some sign of support. "We didn't do anything wrong," he said firmly, though his voice cracked slightly. The lifeguard hesitated, glancing at the woman, then back at the boys. He lowered his voice. "I know, but maybe. Just hang out on the side for now. It'll calm things down." The words weren't cruel, but they weren't comforting either. They were heavy with the weight of someone who knew the situation wasn't fair, but didn't want to challenge it. The lifeguard gave them a small nod and stepped back as if that was all he could do. Jordan felt frustration rise in his chest. He wanted to shout, "Why is she allowed to do this? Why isn't anyone stopping her?" But he swallowed it down. He had been taught to be respectful even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Beside him, Jaden whispered, "Maybe we should just go home." His voice was small, tired. He had been so excited for the pool today, and now all he wanted was to disappear. Jordan shook his head. "No, we belong here. We paid just like everyone else. We signed in just like everyone else." But even as he said it, his words felt thin, like they couldn't hold up against the woman's glare. Minutes passed, though they felt much longer. The boys sat there dripping and silent while the woman continued to watch them. Some parents whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Others avoided eye contact altogether. It was easier to pretend nothing was wrong. But for Jordan and Jaden, the damage had already been done. The pool didn't feel like a safe place anymore. It didn't feel like a place where kids could just be kids. It felt like a place where they had been judged before they even opened their mouths. Jordan thought about his mom, how she always told them to stand tall and never let anyone make them feel less than who they were. He wished she were here now. He wished someone, anyone, would stand up for them. And just when it seemed like the day would end with nothing but humiliation, something unexpected happened. The sound of the front gate opening echoed across the pool deck. Footsteps followed, steady and confident, not rushed but purposeful. A voice called out, warm yet firm, the kind of voice that made people turn their heads instantly. It was a voice the twins knew well. The twins sat quietly on the bench, their towels wrapped around their shoulders, trying to pretend they didn't notice the eyes on them. The laughter and splashing around the pool had returned, but for them, the fun was gone. It felt like the whole world had shifted in just a few minutes, turning a joyful afternoon into something heavy and uncomfortable. Jaden leaned against his brother, speaking in a low voice so only Jordan could hear. "I don't get it. We didn't do anything wrong. Why is she like that?" Jordan stared at the ground, his jaw tight. He didn't have an answer. He wanted to tell his brother that it didn't matter, that sometimes people were just unfair, but the words stuck in his throat. He was used to being the older twin by only a few minutes, but in moments like this he felt the responsibility of protecting Jaden. And right now he felt powerless. Their friends hovered a few steps away, torn between staying near the twins and slipping back into the water. They wanted to help, but they didn't know how. They were just kids, and the woman's presence loomed large, as though she held authority she didn't actually have. Every time the twins thought about going back into the pool, they caught her sharp gaze. She still stood nearby, arms folded, her stance like a guard blocking their way. It was clear she wasn't going to let them enjoy the water without making a scene. Minutes stretched on, and the tension weighed heavier with each one. The lifeguard stayed close but didn't speak up again, clearly nervous about confronting the woman. Parents whispered quietly, some clearly disapproving, but none brave enough to step forward. The silence of adults cut deeper than the woman's words. Jordan's chest tightened with frustration. He had been looking forward to this day all week, and now it was ruined. He thought of his mom's advice. Always carry yourself with respect no matter what. But it was hard to hold on to that when he felt invisible. Jaden tugged at the edge of his towel. "Maybe we should just leave," he whispered again. His voice was soft, not because he was giving up, but because he hated the feeling of being watched, of being unwanted. He wanted to disappear, to escape the stares and the judgment. Jordan turned to him, his voice low but firm. "We shouldn't have to leave. We belong here." His words were steady, but inside he was beginning to doubt himself. How could they prove they belonged if no one would listen? Their friends nodded silently, offering support without words. One of them, a girl about their age, finally spoke up in a trembling voice. "You guys shouldn't leave. Everyone knows you signed in. She can't just tell you what to do." But as soon as she spoke, she glanced nervously at the woman, her courage shrinking back. The woman overheard and snapped, "Mind your business. I'm doing what's right." Her words were like a slap, silencing the group of kids instantly. Jaden pulled his towel tighter around himself. His throat felt dry, his stomach tight. He hated this feeling, the mix of anger, sadness, and embarrassment. He wanted someone, anyone, to stand up for them. Then, just as it felt like the day couldn't get any worse, the sound of footsteps cut through the tension. Strong, steady steps, not rushed but filled with a quiet authority. The kind of footsteps that made people look up without even realizing why. The twins turned their heads at the same time. Their eyes widened in surprise. Walking through the gate of the pool area was their mother. She wasn't dressed in her usual work clothes, but even in casual summer wear, she carried herself with the same confidence and grace that had earned her respect in the community. Her presence was unmistakable, warm, firm, and commanding all at once. People around the pool noticed right away. Conversations quieted, and even the lifeguard straightened at the sight of her. For Jordan and Jaden, it was like a wave of relief washing over them. They hadn't expected her to show up, she was always busy. But at that moment, there was no one they were happier to see. Their mom's eyes immediately found her sons on the bench. She took in their slouched shoulders, their downcast faces, the towels wrapped tightly around them. Then she noticed the woman standing nearby with her arms still crossed. She walked directly toward them, her footsteps echoing against the wet concrete. The crowd seemed to part slightly, people watching with anticipation. Something was about to happen and everyone could feel it. "Boys," she said softly as she reached them, her voice calm but filled with concern. "What's going on here?" Jordan and Jaden looked at each other. Jordan spoke first, his voice careful, as though he didn't want to make the situation worse. "She told us we had to leave. She said we don't belong here." Their mom's expression stayed calm, but her eyes sharpened as she turned to the woman. "Is that true?" she asked evenly, her tone polite but firm. The woman didn't falter. She lifted her chin and replied, "I told them this pool is for members. They shouldn't be here." Without a word, their mom reached into the boys' bag and pulled out their membership cards. She held them up for the woman and anyone else nearby to see. "My sons are members," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the pool deck. "They signed in just like everyone else." The woman's face reddened slightly, but she tried to keep her stance. "Well, I just thought—" Their mom cut her off gently but firmly. "No, you assumed. And you were wrong." The pool was silent now, the only sound the soft lapping of water against the sides. Everyone watched, waiting to see what would happen next. The twins sat a little straighter on the bench, their chests lifting as if their mother's words gave them strength. For the first time since the confrontation began, they felt seen. The woman opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. She seemed to struggle for words, her authority slipping away under the steady gaze of the twins' mother. Jordan glanced at Jaden, and for the first time in what felt like forever, they both allowed a small smile. Their mom was here. They weren't alone anymore, and everyone else at the pool was finally beginning to understand the truth of the situation. The woman shifted uncomfortably under the steady gaze of the twins' mother. It was as if the air around the pool had grown heavier. People leaned forward in their seats, their eyes darting between the two women, waiting for what would be said next. The laughter and splashing from the pool had gone quiet, and even the children sensed that something important was happening. The twins' mother held the membership cards in her hand, her voice calm but clear enough for everyone to hear. "My boys signed in this morning. They paid their fees. They are members just like every other child here. They have every right to swim in this pool." Her words weren't loud, but they carried power. They echoed with a firmness that couldn't be ignored. The woman who only moments earlier had been so sure of herself now looked unsure. She opened her mouth, her hands fidgeting by her sides. I just thought," she began, her voice quieter now. but the mother raised her hand gently, stopping her mid-sentence. No, you didn't think. You judged. And you embarrassed my sons in front of everyone here. Jordan and Jaden sat silently, but their hearts swelled at her words. They had tried to explain, tried to defend themselves, but no one had listened. Now their mother's steady presence was breaking through the silence that had weighed on them all afternoon. The lifeguard stepped closer, finally finding the courage to speak. "Ma'am," he said to the mother, "I knew they had signed in. I should have stepped in sooner. I'm sorry." His face showed real regret, and though his words didn't undo the harm, they mattered. The mother gave him a small nod. "Thank you," she said, her tone soft but pointed. "Next time, don't be afraid to stand up for what's right. These are children. They deserve to feel safe and welcome here." Several parents sitting under umbrellas exchanged glances. Some nodded subtly, ashamed that they had stayed silent earlier. A few even looked at the woman, their eyes questioning her behavior. The woman's face grew redder. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clutching her bag strap like it might anchor her. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone," she muttered defensively. The twins' mother looked directly at her. "Intentions don't erase actions. You told my sons they didn't belong here. You tried to force them out of a place they had every right to be. That is not acceptable." There was no shouting in her voice, no harshness, but the authority in her tone was undeniable. People at the pool who hadn't recognized her earlier now whispered among themselves. Some parents leaned closer, explaining quietly to their kids who she was. The realization rippled across the crowd. This wasn't just any mom. This was the mayor of their town. Jordan and Jaden watched the whispers spread. They had always admired their mom, not just because of her position, but because of how she carried herself with dignity, whether in the office or at home. Seeing her now, standing tall and calm while defending them, made their pride grow even more. The woman, clearly realizing she had overstepped in front of someone with both authority and respect, tried to backtrack. "I really didn't mean any harm," she said weakly. "Maybe I was just being cautious." The mother's expression softened only slightly, but her words remained firm. Caution is asking questions politely. Caution is checking with the staff. What you did was different. You singled out two boys, embarrassed them, and treated them as if they didn't belong before you even gave them a chance to explain. The silence that followed her words was heavy but necessary. It was the kind of silence where people reflected, where truth sank in. A child splashed nearby, breaking the tension for a moment, but even that sound quickly faded as people's attention remained fixed on the confrontation. Finally, the twins' mother turned away from the woman and crouched slightly to be eye level with her sons. Her expression softened instantly, her voice warm. "Are you both all right?" she asked, gently brushing Jaden's damp hair away from his forehead. Jaden nodded slowly, though his throat felt tight. Jordan swallowed hard before answering. "We didn't do anything wrong." His voice cracked just a little, but his words were steady. "I know you didn't," their mother assured them, "and I'm proud of you for handling yourselves with respect. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't belong." Her words wrapped around them like a blanket, steadying the hurt that had been sitting in their chests. For the first time since the confrontation began, the boys felt like the ground under their feet was solid again. The woman, still standing nearby, shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing she could melt away. She looked around, but instead of support, she was met with stares that ranged from disappointment to disapproval. Whatever authority she thought she had, it was gone. The mother stood up tall again, turning back to her. "I think we're done here," she said calmly. "My sons are going back into the pool, and they will enjoy the rest of their day without being harassed." There was no room left for argument. The woman opened her mouth as if to protest, but the words died before they could form. She picked up her bag, muttered something no one could quite hear, and began walking briskly toward the gate. As she left, a quiet ripple of relief spread across the pool. Parents relaxed back into their chairs, kids resumed their splashing, and the air seemed lighter. The twins' friends let out small sighs, their shoulders unclenching now that the moment had passed. And then, something unexpected happened. A few parents began to clap softly at first, then louder. The sound spread, echoing off the pool walls. It wasn't just applause for the mayor. It was applause for what she stood for in that moment. It was for fairness, for dignity, for speaking up when it mattered. The twins' mother gave a small smile but didn't bask in the attention. She simply nodded in appreciation and turned back to her boys. "Go on," she said gently. "Enjoy yourselves. This is your space too." Jordan and Jaden exchanged a glance, their earlier embarrassment slowly giving way to courage. They dropped their towels on the bench and walked back toward the pool. Their friends followed, eager to join them again. As the twins climbed back into the water, they felt something different. Not just the cool relief of the pool against their skin, but a sense of belonging restored. They were reminded that no matter who tried to push them down, they had every right to stand tall. Their mother watched from the side, her arms crossed not in anger, but in quiet pride. She didn't need to say anything else. Her presence was enough, a silent reminder that they were never alone. The afternoon sun glistened on the water as the boys laughed again, racing each other across the pool. Their joy returned, not untouched, but stronger than before, like a flame that had been tested by the wind, yet refused to go out. And around the pool, people carried with them the memory of what they had witnessed, not just a confrontation, but a lesson in dignity, respect, and the importance of speaking up when silence is easier. The sound of clapping still echoed faintly as the woman disappeared through the gate, her figure shrinking in the distance. Around the pool, people exchanged glances, some smiling softly, others shaking their heads at what had just happened. It wasn't every day that a quiet afternoon at the community pool turned into a lesson for everyone present. Jordan and Jaden were already back in the water, their heads bobbing above the surface as they swam from one side of the pool to the other. Their friends joined them, laughter breaking out again as if trying to erase the tension that had filled the air just minutes earlier. The boys splashed each other, raced underwater, and climbed up the diving board, reclaiming the joy that had been stolen from them. Their mother stayed on the side, sitting down on a bench under the shade of an umbrella. She watched them with a steady smile, the same smile she had when she saw them succeed in school or help a neighbor. It wasn't the pride of a mayor standing tall in front of her community. It was the quiet pride of a mother watching her children find their courage again. The lifeguard approached her cautiously. His cheeks were flushed, his whistle dangling uselessly from his neck. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low, "I'm really sorry I didn't handle that better. I should have stepped in sooner." She turned to him, her expression calm but serious. "What matters now is that you've learned something," she said. "Next time you see something wrong, you can make a difference by speaking up. These kids, all of them, rely on the adults here to protect them, not just from danger in the water, but from moments like this." The lifeguard nodded earnestly, her words sinking deep. "You're right," he admitted. "It won't happen again." Nearby, a few parents had gathered, some still visibly uncomfortable with how long they had stayed silent earlier. One woman with a little girl tugging at her hand finally stepped forward. "I just wanted to say," she began hesitantly, "thank you for speaking up. I should have done something too. I won't forget this." The mayor gave a small nod of acknowledgement. "It's never easy," she said gently, "but our children are always watching us. They learn more from what we do than what we say." Her words seemed to linger in the air, sinking into the hearts of those who heard them. Parents shifted in their seats, some glancing at their children who had already gone back to their games in the water, blissfully unaware of how deeply the moment would stay with the adults. Meanwhile, Jordan and Jaden climbed out of the pool and walked over to their mom, dripping wet and grinning. "We raced," Jaden announced breathlessly. "I won." Jordan shook his head with mock frustration. "Only because I slipped when I turned." Their mom laughed softly, wrapping towels around their shoulders. "It doesn't matter who won. What matters is that you went back in." The boys exchanged a quick look, then smiled. They understood what she meant. By going back into the pool, they had proven to themselves and to everyone else that they belonged there just as much as anyone. They hadn't let one person's words take that away. For the rest of the afternoon, the twins enjoyed the pool the way they had originally planned. They bought snacks from the vending machine, lounged in the shallow end with their friends, and even convinced their mom to dip her feet into the water. The earlier confrontation faded like a shadow chased away by the sun. But even as the day returned to normal, something had changed. The people at the pool had witnessed more than just a mother defending her sons. They had seen courage, fairness, and dignity in action. And though the boys might not have realized it fully, the moment had planted something in their hearts too. Later, as the sun began to dip low and the air cooled slightly, the family packed up their things. The boys slung their towels over their shoulders, still talking about the games they had played and the friends they had made that day. Their mom walked beside them, her step steady, her presence comforting. As they reached the parking lot, Jaden hesitated before speaking. "Mom," he said quietly, "thank you for coming when you did." She looked down at him with a warm smile. "I'll always be there when you need me," she said. "But I want you to remember something even more important." Both boys looked up at her, curious. "You don't need me to prove you belong," she told them. "You belong everywhere you've earned the right to be. Don't let anyone's words make you doubt that. Ever." The twins nodded, her words etching themselves into their memories. Jordan felt taller somehow, as though a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Jaden smiled softly, the hurt from earlier replaced with quiet strength. Back at the pool, families packed up their belongings and kids begged for 5 more minutes in the water. But the story of what had happened that day wouldn't be forgotten. Parents would talk about it at dinner tables, kids would mention it to friends, and the woman who had walked away would likely think about her choices for a long time. What started as an ordinary summer afternoon had become something much more. It was a reminder that fairness matters, that silence can sometimes do harm, and that dignity is found not in shouting but in standing firm with grace. For Jordan and Jaden, it was also a reminder of the strength they carried within themselves, and the unshakable support of a mother who believed in them. As they drove home, the boys leaned against the car windows, tired but content. The pool shimmered in the distance, reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. It no longer felt like the place where they had been humiliated. It felt like the place where they had learned something they would never forget, that they had a voice, that they had worth, and that no one could take that away. And while the summer would bring many more days at the pool, this one would always stand out, not for the conflict but for the way it ended. With courage, with truth, and with the quiet but powerful reminder that respect belongs to everyone.